Hello. I'm Aaron Lovejoy. I'm the studio painter for Flying Frog Productions, and also am an airbrusher and a teacher and a bunch of other things. Griller extraordinaire, you know. Anyways, today we are talking about airbrushing. We are going to be behind the brush. So, that being said, let's get our camera out, flip that so it doesn't show my legs. And let's start talking a little bit about airbrushing. All right. Has everyone airbrushed before, or you're thinking about airbrushing, or I don't know, you're also a professional airbrusher? I don't know. There's lots of reasons you could be in this class. Possibly you're getting a new airbrush, or you've had an airbrush and it's just so stinking frustrating you don't know what to do, or you're the infamous I only prime with my airbrusher, and all these things hopefully will change today, because you will know your airbrush a little bit better and you actually start having some fun with it. So the first thing is I want you guys to all promise, and you have to say this out loud, really loud in your houses, so that the rest of your family can hear it. I will not let this airbrush replace these paintbrushes. So say that really loud in your house right now. Your airbrush is going to enhance your paintbrush. Your paintbrush is what makes everything look super, super cool. Your airbrush is just a way to get from A to B a little bit faster. And so that's the thing. I see a lot of kids these days grab an airbrush first on. They never learn how to paintbrush, and they always have struggle with painting because they just don't know how to paintbrush. And it's very hard to do airbrush first, paintbrush second, because I feel lucky that I learned how to paintbrush first, the really, really slow way, lots of layers and just slow painting, because then when I airbrushed, I still knew how to paintbrush. So anyways, that's the key. When you get a brand new airbrush, or even if maybe you've got an airbrush and you've been using it, you see mine's dirty. I left it dirty on purpose so that we'd have a dirty airbrush for this class. A couple things to think about right off the bat. And let's see. I'm going to zoom in a little bit closer. I'm just going to show you a couple things when you first get your airbrush. Hopefully it's brand new. And excuse the air compressor in the background, but we need it on for the class, so sorry. But you can see my needle's a little bit dirty here. It's got some orange on it. Let me wipe that off real quick. Just so we can see what we're doing here. Usually I do airbrushing classes and my airbrush is like totally clean, and it doesn't help when we're like, here's how you clean your airbrush. Here's how to clean an already clean airbrush. So I don't know if you can see this right here, but the needle, let me turn this chuck a little bit and pull my needle back. So the needle pops out of your airbrush right there. I want you to memorize how far the needle goes out past the nozzle, and all airbrushes are a little bit different. If you have, say, a Sotar 2020, the needle comes out not like that. Let me take this little front part off. If you have a Sotar 2020, we'll put this back on. Push our needle forward. The needle comes out about 1/16 of an inch from the front. And on our Patriot 105, it comes out about 1/8 of an inch. So that's an important thing to remember when your airbrush is clean and relatively new, is how far the needle comes out, because that will be one of our ways of telling if our airbrush is getting clogged. Because airbrushes are funny, they clog relatively slowly. So you could have a halfway clogged airbrush and it seems to still be painting just fine, but you're starting to have problems, like weird intermittent problems. And so knowing how long the needle is supposed to be will be a good way to show if it's clogged. So that being said, I'm going to plug in my airbrush. Now you'll notice I have this funky little thing down here. This is called a quick release. You want to get one of those for your airbrush because it makes attaching and unattaching from your hose very easy, so you can switch airbrushes. And obviously, if you have different types of airbrushes, and I don't here, but some of them have a different connector size down here for the air. Badger airbrushes is a very small one. If you get like an Infinity, it's a much larger, or Iwata, it's a much larger connection. But once you get a quick release on there, it will fit on any other quick release plug. So you can do multiple kinds of airbrushes, switch them out. This is great for cleaning because at first you're going to be cleaning a lot. So there you have it. Okay, so first thing you do with your airbrush, find out how long the needle sticks out. Second thing, I'm going to grab this. This is my washout tank. It is a cup with a paper towel in it. And let's move this back a little bit. Just like that. I'm going to put in a little bit of my thinner. And maybe a little bit more. Spray it out into the cup. Now I don't want to get right up on the cup like this because it will splatter water or paint back out at me. If you go about 6 inches away, and let me turn off my palette cam for now. If you go about 6 inches away, and let's go a little further out. Can you see my spray? So you want to have a nice cone of spray and kind of memorize how this sprays out. What I don't want to have happen is the spray is kind of sputter like this. Now I'm moving my finger, but if you're pushing all the way down on your air, pulling all the way back on the paint, which is just water right now, or thinner, it should just spray the same spray all the time. But if it starts doing sputtering back and then it'll get more or less, that's a sign that you're clogging. So you want to see how forceful your spray is with a clean airbrush. You see the cone is a certain size of spray that comes out, and it definitely doesn't change until it runs out of thinner. So memorize that as well. The third thing you want to memorize is, see how it pushes my skin right there? Memorize the air pressure. So on your finger. If you're only getting a little bit of that, you probably have a clog in your air system, which is on a Badger airbrush. It's right here. Oops. And there's like these little bitty holes up here. That's where the air comes out. It hits inside of this cup and does a little vortex thing, and that's what gives you a nice even spray. If any of those holes are clogged, even partially, it will mess up your air pressure, which will then start messing up your painting. So few things just right off the bat to think about when you're airbrushing. All right. So let's just start spraying. Any questions so far off of that part?
None that I see. If they pop up, I'll read them.
Okay. Now, if you have a used airbrush, if you've been using your airbrush, and let's say you've been using it for months and stuff, you may be partially clogged, so that 1/16 of an inch is not happening on a Patriot 105. Maybe it's, the needle's a little bit further back. Maybe you're not getting that even flow of paint out. You're going to have to clean your nozzle and stuff, and I'm going to show you how to do that here in a little bit. But for now, let's just pour some primer in. This is Stynylrez. It's made by Badger Airbrush Company, and it's one of the best airbrush primers that I've used. I really, really like it. It is ready to go. You don't have to thin it anymore. If you do decide to thin it with water only. All right. So, airbrushing. You push down for air, you pull back for paint, right? So that was a lot of paint came out. If you spray close to your model, like about an inch away or even a half an inch, you get what's called a focus spray, or what I call a focus spray. So you get a very small dot. Let's go back 2 inches, see what happens. Go right next to it. See the dot's a little bit bigger? The reason for this is you're further away, the spray spreads out as it goes, right? It's also in the shape of a circle. That's important to remember too. If I go, let's say, 4 to 6 inches away, that's the size of my dot. See, the spray is much thinner and it's spread out even further. So, something like that. All right. So, focus spray, will give us things like, and you see how that made it went splattery like that? That is because I sprayed, and then when I push the air again, it blows off what's left on my needle. So that could be a bad thing. Like maybe you got you're airbrushing a model and you go in for that final touch and it does this splatter thing and ruins, you have to repaint over it. So a lot of times what I'll do if I'm spraying, especially for a while, and that's a while right there, instead of spraying on the model directly, I'll spray, and then let's say the model's over here, I do what's called a soft spray over here. So maybe I've got a paper towel. I always have a paper towel on my desk when I'm airbrushing. I'll do that soft spray. Now it's perfect again. Soft spray over here. Now when I spray, there's nothing comes out. So remember to do these soft sprays. If you watch airbrushing videos online or anything, a lot of times you see they'll spray, soft spray off camera. So like let's say they're spraying this model. Spray, soft spray, soft spray. So that's a good way to keep that speckling from happening. It just happens because paint collects on the tip of your needle. Okay, so we got focus spray, blending spray. I do, all airbrushers do what's called as a hard spray. So a hard spray is pushing, and I don't want to spray onto my models over here. So you push all down on the air and you pull all back on the paint. So all the way back on the paint, all the way down in the air. So the way we do this is all at the same time. That's a hard spray. It's like one motion, down, back, off. Hard spray right there, watch. That's my soft spray now. A hard spray sprayed so much paint, that's how much paint was left on my needle. So that's why it's important to always do those soft sprays off your model so you don't get that speckling. Hard spray is if you think that your airbrush is starting to clog a little bit. And what this does is when your airbrush is off, the first amount of air that comes out is always the most forceful. So if you hit a hard spray, soft spray, we should be good to airbrush again. So one way for me to tell if my airbrush is clogging in a small, like micro clog type of way, is I'll be airbrushing. And let's say I'm doing really fine detail. So I'm doing like little bitty dots like that. You see that? It just changed color a little bit. Little bit. Just getting those little bitty dots like that. If I find that I've been spraying that a bunch, and we'll see later what I use a spray like that for. If I've been spraying a lot, sometimes when I pull back, the amount of pullback that I used before to get this size dot, I now have to pull like twice as far back to get that size dot. And a lot of times what happens, the further you pull back, the wider the opening gets, and then it will all of a sudden, instead of doing a little dot like this, I accidentally get a dot like that. And that's not good. So that's a little bit of paint curing inside of my nozzle, and it doesn't allow me to make small dots like this. So to combat this, a lot of times when I'm airbrushing, I will just do token hard spray. Hard spray, hard spray, soft spray, right back to doing tiny dots. Now, my airbrush is a little bit clogged right now, so I am not able to keep like a real even, like I should be able to hit this small size dot right here in the middle every single time. But since my airbrush is a little bit clogged, it's not giving me the ability to do that. So, but thank God it's a little bit clogged, because then I can show you how to clean it. Okay, so another way of airbrushing, things to practice, I guess, when you're starting out airbrushing. When I airbrush, I typically, let's say I'm shooting for this spot right here, right? I'm shooting to have paint, like that's where my model is. I don't want to spray like this, because if something bad happens and I go too much, I'm stuck on the model. What I want to do is spray in sort of a pendulum motion like this. And if you notice, I'm not pulling back all the way on the trigger. Like I'm not making it as hard as possible to have the max amount of paint come out. I'm just going like halfway back, and I'm going back and forth. And what this does is each time I go past my model, I'm going off the model too. So if anything bad happens, I'm in the motion of already getting off the model. So that's a good thing to remember. The other thing is, if I spray directly down, you notice that it just gets a pure black dot here. Your airbrush, this is what makes an airbrush super, super awesome. If I spray at an angle, so if I pull this paper towel is got a little pattern on it, right? If I spray directly over it and I just spray solid, there's no real pattern. But if I turn my airbrush and I come in at an angle, like that, all of a sudden, see, I picked up shadows on the bottom sides of all the little pattern on the paper towel. So this is really important, because you can build shadows and highlights and midtones in on your models at a certain direction, and yet let the airbrush work for you, which is a really, really the most powerful part about an airbrush, I think. Okay, any questions on that part?
I'll read something sure that.
So did you see? I was doing hard sprays and it was coming out like this, then all of a sudden it came out like that. I just cleared a clog. So, and here's another way of telling if you've got a clog. So I cleared a clog, but I think I made a clog. So if I push down on air only, look, paint's coming out. So have you ever had that? Yeah, it's a problem. So I'm not even pulling back on my airbrush. Now, maybe that's the amount of paint you want. So you're like, oh, cool, I can just kind of work with that. The problem is it's putting paint out without me allowing it. And the reason for that is there's a little bitty, inside my nozzle, it's clogged like halfway. So what that's doing is it's pushing my needle back just a little bit, so it can't go all the way forward into the nozzle. And that lets a little paint out the side when I push the air. So let me pull my needle back just a little bit and push it forward so that it should be tight against the front of the nozzle. And look at that. No leakage anymore. Now, getting little bitty dots. Actually, it's spraying much better now. I hope I didn't clear it too good. So see, I'm getting much more of the same size dots all the way around. So one thing I practice at home is putting what I call 10% sprays down. So just spraying just enough. And you really do need to have some reading glasses on or something for this, because sometimes it's hard to see the paint come out. I'm just putting little bitty, barely any paint down. You ask, Aaron, why the heck would you do that? That's like ridiculous. Well, here's the reason why. So, and oftentimes you can wear gloves to protect your skin. I don't, but I will spray on my fingers. So I do my test spray on my finger to make sure that I'm getting a really small amount. And I can practice on a model before it's even painted. Go, okay, let's say I want a shadow right on the bottom side of his lens up here, or in his face mask. Did you see that? It made it a little bit darker. I'm going to do it on the other side. So one, I'm testing to see if how small of a thing I can spray and get a result without like messing up the model. Put a little shadow under his arm. I can also test to see how dark I can go before it starts looking weird. So I'm actually just practicing my airbrushing. And what am I practicing on? A model I'm going to prime. So what do you think would be the best reason to practice on a model like this with your primer? Does anybody know? Okay, so I'll tell you why. It's terrifying spraying on a model. And oftentimes I will be, and this is a model I did last year.
Cover it up anyway.
You're going to cover it up anyway. Yes, okay. Perfect answer. There you go. Who was that?
John Bell.
All right. Thank you, John.
John Ball.
Cool. So when I'm spraying on a model, let's say I'm spraying on a finished model like this, I might be like, hey, I want to push some shadows in a couple spots. I need to have the confidence to be able to do that. So if you don't have that confidence, you're kind of in a lot of trouble. So doing it on a model that's not primed yet is a great way to build confidence, but also just practice your airbrushing. So I can practice, let's say there's a whole bunch of texture back here on the skin. And I will spray from a really like below angle, I guess you'd call it. 90 degrees from the bottom almost. Okay, look at that. I've got built-in highlights and shadow. Very cool. You can also test, like, obviously, I can't spray from below right in this bottom part, right? So maybe I have to come in from like 90 degrees, like, and just spray just a little bit. You see how much damage that does just with 10% sprays. Like I'm spraying about that much paint out at a time. Short sprays. I typically don't do this. I typically don't hold my airbrush, my air on and spray like this. I like doing the small sprays. Now here's the other thing. When you do little 10% sprays, usually there's absolutely no splatter afterwards because not enough paint collects on the end of the airbrush or on the needle. So here you see I've got a little paint collected on the needle. That's called dry tip. You just want to clean that off. Dry tip happens all the time. I used to try to fix it by putting things like Badger has needle juice. There's several products that try to keep it from dry tipping. It will dry tip anyways. You know, it eventually blows that stuff off and it dry tips again. So I just clean the dry tip off. It's in my airbrushing repertoire where I just spray for a couple minutes and then clean the dry tip. Then I don't worry about it. It's awesome. So continuing on with our airbrushing here. So one thing that I'll do is I'll see what it looks like when I come in close. So I can get a little bit more of that focus spray. And what it looks like when I come out from a much bigger distance. And you can't really see it on my camera here. Maybe like that. And with this, I can get a really light shadow kind of coursing up the model like this. So I can practice different kinds of sprays. And then at the end of the day, go, hey, or let's see, maybe back here, spray a little bit. I want to see if I can hit some of these. There's some deeper folds in the skin back here. So what if I come in real close? So I do a more focused spray, but I spray really lightly. So just a little bit like that. Sometimes I do a little flicking motion, so that gives me the spray hits the model, and then I flick upwards and let go of the air. So it does a little bit stronger down here, and it fades away as it goes up. So with that, I can get kind of a dark shadow right there, and it kind of just fades to nothing going up. So these are all really good ways of practicing your precision with airbrushing. Practice the angles. And then at the end of the day, you're like, okay, I've got it. And you just spray over it. So when you're priming a model, I always spray from all different angles. You know, when you're base coating it, I try to keep from the same angle because, you know, shadows are from below, highlights are from above. But when you're priming, you want to go from all angles so all of the model gets covered. It's one of my pet peeves to start painting and then there's a part of the model not primed. I love it. So let's get this primed up real quick. Any questions on that? Just sort of getting initial practice and stuff. If you notice, this is primer, and I'm getting really small dots with my primer. And quite honestly, I haven't practiced my airbrushing dexterity for a little bit, so I'm not even as good as I could be. But I'm airbrushing with a this airbrush has a 0.4 needle, which is a very large needle. This is like your general purpose needle. That's another thing when you start airbrushing. You can get a really high-end airbrush like the Sotar 2020 or Infinity 2-in-1 as a really high-end German airbrush. They have much smaller needles, and the problem with these airbrushes is they clog a lot. And if you've got one of those airbrushes and you find yourself clogging all the time, the reason for that is we're using acrylic paints, and acrylic paints hate your airbrush. So it just tends to clog more. So if you have a general purpose airbrush, so 0.4 needle or even larger, but 0.4 is about right, you can do a lot more airbrushing without clogging. And if you notice, like the model gets wet, but then it dries out very quickly. I don't try to flood the model with paint. I spray kind of like what I call dry. So it's just a little bit of paint at a time. And then hopefully it dries very, very quickly. This helps me build up color, shadow, primer very quickly. And I really don't have to wait for anything. I can almost start touching the model, you know, immediately after I airbrush it. Oop. Ran out of paint. Oh, no, I didn't.
Do you have a preferred color for priming, or does it vary depending on what you're painting?
I typically do black or white. Black just by itself. Especially if I'm going to base coat the model a color. And I'll show you on this model that process. But my typical prime job is a Zenithal prime, so it's black and white. But again, those are my preferences, and maybe you find that you like gray better, or you know, whatever. So find a color that you like the best. I usually go by the rule of if how I primed it causes me problems during the painting, I will prime it differently the next time. So you can also Zenithal prime and then just spray color over that. So, you know, it's kind of, it's one of those things where you got to play around with it a little bit. Oops. Now I'm out of paint. So you'll always find that your initial first color or your, primer that's going over the whole model is the one that's going to take the longest, and then after that, each color afterwards or each step after is relatively quick. So, okay, we got that one. Let me spray this guy real quick. And again, we did a couple testers. You could do things like, what I want to see how much shadow I can put into this flag, or can I add shadow in this flag without hitting the tassel? Yeah, I think I can. So you can answer a lot of questions for yourself. See how that just added a little shadow under the knee, maybe under the arm. Under the face. Very cool. I can see how if I want to do like sort of theatrical lighting where it's very strong lighting from one side to the other, I can add more shadow, like let's say on this side. So now he's more shaded on this side and less shaded on that side. And that gives me kind of cool, I call it Hollywood lighting. So I can kind of ring up the side of this. Anyways, good stuff. Definitely worth practicing on. I mean, you could actually shade your model after painting it with primer if you wanted to. You have that much control. Okay, so let's just spray this. Something you'll find when doing smaller models, and right now you can see I'm kind of clogged. My hard sprays are super weak. Oh, and then I busted through the clog. So that's the reason for the hard spray. Doesn't always work, but it works a lot of the time. Especially if your airbrush was already clean to begin with. You don't have already built up residue in there. All right, so we got that primed. We got the bigger one primed. I'm going to clean out my airbrush. I'm going to show you how I do that between colors. So I spray it out. And then I've got my thinner. Now my thinner is a concoction. It's just isopropyl alcohol. So I get the 90 or above percent isopropyl alcohol. 1 part that, 9 parts water or distilled water. I just use water out of our tap, out of our sink because I'm lazy. But technically you should be using distilled water. There'll be less buildup of minerals and stuff. But I use the filtered water in mine, so I think it works out okay. Clean this cup out a little bit. And you see how the water it started out really dark and now it's running out clean. Doesn't mean that the airbrush is clean, but it does mean that we've got it pretty good. You see that? I'm looking at the spray, and if the spray starts tapering off like this, that means there's a clog in there. So I'm always looking for that when I'm cleaning my airbrush. When you clean between colors, you can actually tell the health of your nozzle, how much paint stuck in there. So this looks actually pretty good. I guarantee you there is some paint in there, but it's spraying out pretty cool. You see it'll spray down, water's gone. We got that. So if you're going from a color, like normally I don't mind, like say going from dark red to medium red to light red, because I want a little bit of that, whatever's left in there. But let's say we're going from, black to white, and I want my white to be white. I don't want to have any black in it. So what you can do, one, you could take the whole thing apart and clean it all out. But I guarantee you this paint that's on the edges up here is kind of dried, so it's not going to come out. I'll pull my needle out, wipe it off on my towel here. Spray a little bit more thinner in there. With no needle in my airbrush, I'll just do a spray through. So a lot of times paint gets stuck on the needle, and that's what will then start coloring your paint, the next color that goes in. I'll close this down. Make sure when you're putting your needle in your airbrush that this trigger is all the way in, so it's seated just perfectly. Sometimes it can get stuck, like see here, it doesn't go down at all. That's stuck up. It's not in the little hole that's where the air is. So what will happen is your needle will hit the metal right above the hole, and that will bend your needle. So you don't want to do that. So always make sure that your needle's seated good. Then put your trigger seated good. Then put your needle in like this. I'm going to do one more spray through of just thinner. That's looking good. Good spray. And now we can switch to, let's say, white. So I've got white thinner. And I'm going to... I missed that whole top part. That's okay. It'll be white anyway. So when I'm doing, like, say, a Zenithal prime, I'm going to spray from about 45 degrees, like that, angle, all the way around the model. And I'm about 6 inches away, and I'm doing these little sprays like this. See how there's barely any paint coming out? I'm not going like that. I'm spraying little bits of paint out, and I'm going in a pendulum motion. So I can go just like this. I love this Badger Stynylrez white because there's always like little speckly dots from airbrushing, and they are very small in this. And you'll find the lighter the color, like whites and stuff, will oftentimes have really big speckles. It's just kind of the way it goes. And I don't have that because I think the Stynylrez is just really good paint. Really good. Has a really good consistency. So I'm kind of going back and forth. See that? I'm starting to pick up light and shadows. Always keeping at this angle. If I start going down like this, if I start coming in straight, I lose all those shadows. So see all the shadow and light that I'm building into this piece? If I change my degree, my angle, that's going to be bad. So once I get color on here, all the way around, maybe even a little bit from below on this arm. I'm going to do over here. Now I will come in from an even higher angle, like 90 degrees, and I'm only going to choose one part. So I want my main light to be right here. I mean, you could choose the light coming in from this side, but I think this side will be better. And I come in from like 90 degrees, and I spray only in that area. Maybe I'll spray up here on the flag from that side. So now you see we're starting to get, and I'm going to do a little bit more in the helmet. I missed that before. So now you see how that light is really starting to show up on this side of the model. Now, if you were going to speed paint this, use some contrast or army paint or speed paints, you're already in a good way. Like you've got some lights, some shadows. When you put that speed paint on, it's going to look really good. You can always give it a quick dry brushing to kind of pick out some of the edges. There's always light coming from both sides of your model, so just make sure that you spray highlights in the back too. I try to make them not quite as bright as what's on the front, because the front is the front, but I think that looks pretty good. I'll spray a little bit down here on the base. I always try to let the backs of my bases be darker than the front, because it sort of frames the model. But you see that? That looks pretty good, huh? Alright, so sometimes I will spray this out. A lot of times, now I'm just spraying my paint out because it's quicker this way, but if there's a bunch of, especially the primer, if there's a bunch of primer left in my cup, I'll pour it back in, so I'll save it. This stuff's liquid gold. So if you see this spray going like that, that means we're clogged. So you'll be spraying and it just starts tapering off and then it goes harder, less, harder. That means we've got a clog in the airbrush. So let's take a look inside of our airbrush and see. There's lots of things that will tell us there's a clog. Have you ever had bubbles in your cup? That's kind of a precursor to a clog. If you notice your needle going backwards, like we said before, that's why we checked it. I mean, it still seems like it's at a 1/16 of an inch, but it might not be quite that. So we'll give it a look. Couple other things: the paint coming out without pulling back on the trigger. That's the sign of there's a clog, but it's just clogged your airbrush open basically. Another thing is if you have, let's pull this, I'm going to just pull this back a little bit. If you ever had a wiggly trigger, like your trigger should like flick back instantly. And mine's almost a little wiggly, but if I've had them like this or like even further, it's just sort of flapping in the wind. That is a big sign that you're clogging. The reason for that is if your needle's all the way back here, and let's pull this back. Find a black spot on the mat here. If my needle is like halfway back, that means because I started with it all the way forward. So all the way forward, and this trigger is tight. Halfway back, and this happens during the painting process, all of a sudden my trigger is not tight anymore. Because basically the needle has moved backwards, and so it's not tight anymore. Now you can fix this by just simply undoing the chuck, pushing the needle tight again, and now it's tight against whatever was in there before. But you're not fixing the problem, you're just making it worse, in my opinion. So you have that. So a few ways to get rid of the clog that's happening there. One, I always remove dry tip. We removed that a little bit earlier because the black was really doing it, getting all dry tipped on there. White paint will do it incredibly fast. So a lot of times when I'm like doing zenithal primes, I will actually spray the front side of the model and then clean my dry tip and then spray the back side. So I actually clean the dry tip once in between on a single model. On black, you can do 5 or 6 models at a time and then clean the dry tip. But on colors like white, it just happens quicker. It pays to clean that off because what happens is it starts impeding the flow of air out of the nozzle or the flow of paint out of the nozzle. And that will start facilitating the clog in the nozzle, and it will also give you bubbles up here. So keep that dry tip off. Sometimes you can just do a hard spray and that will clean the dry tip, but otherwise you just use your fingers. I just use the pads of my fingers. You can use your fingernail, like on a 0.4 needle. You can use your fingernail because the needles are a little bit more robust. But if you have like a Sotar and it's a 0.2 or a harder Steinbeck at a 0.15, you got to be really careful because you can bend that needle, and some of those needles are like $80, so you want to be really careful. All right, so to fix that clog, hard spray. If the hard spray doesn't work, what I usually do is I undo the chuck, pull back my needle a little bit, and you only go back about 1/4 of an inch because that opens up your airway here, and I do a hard spray again. Boom, boom, hard spray. Push the needle back in, do another hard spray, and then see if it airbrushes. If that works, great. If it's still clogged, what I do is undo the chuck, pull the needle back, and I just kind of like, I call it juicing the needle, kind of just go in and out, and I also twist the needle. So I'm just hoping that anything that's inside that nozzle gets dislodged, and I don't have to take my airbrush apart. So push the needle back in hard, and let me just put a little water in here so you can see something come out. Hard spray, and then see if it airbrushes. If that works, great. If not, you got to take your airbrush apart. So that's what we're going to do now. Any questions about clogging, like while we're at it? Okay. So to clean my airbrush, now the reason why I only pulled the needle back a little bit, about 1/4 of an inch, is because usually you have a cup full of paint. I used to pull the needle way back because I thought, oh, I gotta clear that nozzle. Like, you cleared it at this much. Like, the nozzle's cleared. There's no needle in there. The further I start pulling this needle back with paint in there, I'm actually pulling paint all the way back through my airbrush. And that's really bad. When I first started painting, I would have paint coming out of my trigger. I've seen airbrush videos where on how to clean your trigger. Guess how to clean your trigger? Don't have paint back there. That's like the easiest way. It will happen at first, but if you're having paint back here, you're doing something wrong. You're pulling paint back through your airbrush. So just be more vigilant of not doing that. So I've got my airbrush, pulled my needle out, and then I'm going to take the front end off of my airbrush. So in this case, pull this whole front casing off. The nozzle just falls out. Some have like a screw action, like it screws in, and they have like a little tool. I think Iwata's that way, Masters are that way. Harder Steinbeck and Badger, just the nozzle sits in there. It just falls out, which is nice. So I've got my nozzle. I'm thinking it's clogged. Let me set this down. So I've got my little jar for cleaning airbrushes. I've got a nylon brush. This is a nylon cleaning brush from Dremel Tool. We've got these things. These things you want to use sparingly. These are little pipe cleaners. They will scratch the inside of your airbrush, so I only use these like once a month to like do a deep cleaning, so not very much. Neither of these tools will work in my nozzle, and the nozzle is the part that we need to clean. These are little makeup remover pads. This is really good for cleaning inside the cup. Then we've got a little salsa cup. I use salsa cups for mixing my paint and also for cleaning my nozzle. Oh shoot, this is not even open. All right. Brand new bottle of isopropyl. Let's see if I can do this without spilling all over my desk. Okay. So I put that in there. I'm going to put my nozzle into the isopropyl alcohol, and we'll leave it for, 10, 15, 20 minutes, half an hour, whatever. It's not going to do anything to the nozzle tip itself. So we're just going to wait for the next half an hour, and if you guys have any questions. No, I'm just kidding. We're not going to wait that long. I got that. Oh, I used my paper towel, didn't I? Grab another one. So I'm going to show you a couple ways to clean this nozzle. I'm going to do the I'm going to drop a bunch of stuff on the floor first. Then run over my airbrush hose. I'm doing a great job. All right. Oh my gosh. That airbrush hose wants to be run over. It's like pushing back. Okay, so I'm going to create with this paper towel a little, you know the little thing you used to make and stick in your sister's ear when you were a kid? That thing. Okay, so we got that. I'm going to dip it in my isopropyl alcohol and we'll just stick it into the nozzle. So that shape actually fits the nozzle pretty well. You can kind of see a little bit of stuff has already squeezed out the front. And we've got a dirty paper towel. So obviously there's a little bit of paint left in there. I'm going to take my needle. This is the unapproved Aaron Lovejoy way of doing it. And I can run my needle inside of the nozzle. And I can kind of tell just by the way it feels if there's paint in there or if it's clean. Like the metal feels harder. And if there's paint in there, it feels softer. If that makes any sense. What I don't want to do is scrape the inside of my nozzle because this is these nozzles are made out of brass and it's a soft metal and it will scrape and then you'll have problems like you'll have air leakages and stuff like that. So when I say scrape the inside of your nozzle, I don't mean scrape the inside of the nozzle. I mean gently coax out whatever paint's in there with your needle. But it works really, really well. I'll take a new paper towel, run it through. And I'm telling you right, look, there's still a lot of paint in there. But luckily, it's not too bad. So let's put that in there. And I've got some sort of goo in there. It's like from my last paint session. Oh, I think I glued something with Elmer's glue with this cup.
Probably.
That was a mistake. That's all we need is Elmer's glue inside my nozzle, clogging it later. So we've got these little things. These are applicator brushes. I think they're made for fingernails or something, but everyone uses them for applying glue and stuff to models. You see that? I can kind of ramrod it in here. Problem is it only gets to about here in the nozzle, and then, any paint that is pushing forward is just stuck right there. So let's do the paper towel thing again. A little bit more. I think that's pretty good. Now what I'll do is I'll grab my airbrush, reset it up. So if you keep your nozzle clean, you generally don't have to worry about anything else. Paint getting back in here and drying usually happens because your nozzle's clogged. It's the paint can't go forward, so it gets stuck in here and it dries out. It will slowly but surely dry out in that part of the airbrush too, and that's what these things are for. I'll just stick them in, spin it around. Obviously soak the airbrush in some isopropyl for like 10 minutes. Put this in, spin it around, pull it out, and usually it gets any paint that was stuck in there out. But that builds up very slowly. This builds up much more quickly. I just threw my nozzle somewhere.
Do you have a question?
Okay.
John says, do you have a recommended airbrush compressor combination that is good for beginners but will be useful as one skill develops?
So are you going for a cheapo recommendation or like middle of the road?
Probably middle of the road.
Okay. So you can get a compressor and get a quiet compressor. You don't need like a jackhammer one. They have small compressors that you can get at Harbor Freight for relatively inexpensive. They're made for airbrushing in your house or something. Don't get a really small one, but get they're like about this size. The Badger has a TC909. I know they're changing up their airbrush pretty soon, so I don't even know if they have those anymore, but it's the TC909 is the style of airbrush. All these airbrushes come from China. They're all pretty good. I started with actually the thing that got me really going on airbrushing was I got a Master G22 airbrush. It is literally a piece of crap. It's like a super cheap Chinese knockoff airbrush. I got the airbrushing compressor and a bunch of other stuff for $100. I think you can get it for around the same amount now, and this is like 15 years later, so that's pretty incredible. And that will get you going. The problem is the airbrush itself is really cheap. You can get a Badger airbrush for $60, $70. Patriot 105. I would go with the Patriot 105. It's a general purpose airbrush, and it is just a workhorse. The needles are relatively inexpensive to replace. So I'd get this, and I'd get the Harbor Freight compressor, that type of thing. You can get both online on Amazon. So that would be my recommendation there. If you get this, like I've been using a Badger airbrush for like 15 years. Little known fact, I've never actually bought a Badger airbrush. I got sponsored by them, and I had never used them before, so it was pretty cool. But if I wasn't sponsored by them, I would buy a Patriot 105 for sure. It's just a good airbrush. It works. I can get pretty small details with the Patriot 105. My second airbrush would be something a little bit more high end, so a Sotar 2020. This has got a smaller needle in it, and that will allow you to spray inks and stuff like that. So like inks like this. They're a little bit more watery. They don't clog the way regular acrylics do, and so you switch to that. But for now, get yourself a Patriot 105 and then get an airbrush off the internet, basically. You don't need the double tanked compressors because I don't think it used to matter, but I think airbrushes have gotten so good that it really doesn't matter now. You don't really need a double tank. The one I'm using right now is a double tank, so it airbrushes for a little bit without turning on. Normal, like that. The normal compressors that don't have a double tank, they run when you spray. So if you start spraying air, it turns on. When you stop spraying air, it turns off. That's how it works. This one turns on, fills up the tank, and then it airbrushes for a good 30 seconds before it turns on again, which I don't really think is a good trade-off, but whatever. So anyways, that's this airbrush cleaned. You got another question?
Yeah. What's your opinion on Greg's airbrushes?
I don't know. I've never used them. I have friends that swear by them. So it's just like a paintbrush. So I love like Raphael 8404s. Some people like Winsor Newton Series 7s. I recently switched to Zem brushes. From Sabat Miniatures. They work just as good but are half the price. So it's one of those things where like everybody has their own taste for airbrushes, and the Grex airbrush has the trigger down here, but it's not a twin action. So this is a twin action. You push down for air, you pull back for paint. Some airbrushes you push down and it does air and paint at the same time. That's what a Grex does with the trigger. That's maybe better for like doing like terrain, and I mean I know guys that spray on miniatures and stuff too, but you don't have the control of doing the 10% sprays just a little bit, that type of thing. So I do know that Grex has other airbrushes that are twin action, but most people get the one with the trigger. This might be difficult, like the dexterity of your fingers. Everyone's a little bit different. Like I'm really good at pushing. I can push down at a certain, or I can pull back at a certain level, but I have to push down all the way. I can't do a little bit down and a little bit back. My finger doesn't work that way. So it's all down, a little bit back, and I can airbrush good that way. Some people can't even do that. It's just like all down, all back, so they don't have as much control. So maybe the trigger gives you a little bit more control. It is what it is. I do know that the Grex has less problems with dry tips because when you pull your hand off the trigger, it lets the air go a little bit longer than the paint. And so a lot of times some people will do, when they pull the paint back, they let go of the paint, but they still keep the air on, and that blows any paint off the end of the airbrush. Again, that's not really, I don't know, my brain doesn't work that way. So, I do little pulls like this. It's constant, small amounts of paint, little bit of air, and that's how I keep it from, having too much paint on the tip of the brush, spraying little speckles. All right. Let's put this over here. Where are we at? Okay, so let's go back to my how I thin my paint. So I use, this is my container for cleaning, but this is also my concoction for thinning. So I put my thinner in a smaller empty bottle. So I just use my 1:10 ratio. Oh, I just broke this bottle. I can't believe it.
Did you really?
Yeah.
Okay.
Oh my gosh. I've never seen that before. I've been using this bottle for many, many years. So I just spray my thinner into the bottle. And we'll put this nozzle back on and hope that it works. If not,
it's fine.
It's fine. That's what I said. So the reason I do this is because I can put 3-4 drips. I can be more controlled. I found with the bottle, I used to try to thin my paints this way, and oh shoot, I put a ton of water in there. So a ton of thinner in there. So that it's not as good. So I use the little, you can buy, Reaper has sets of empty bottles, for mixing your own paint and stuff. I just put my thinner in there. So isopropyl alcohol, 90%. I use 10% of that to 90% water. I just eyeball it. If it smells super alcohol-y, you probably put too much alcohol in, but you're still probably okay. Isopropyl alcohol will destroy your paint. So a lot of people will tell you don't use this at all. In fact, Badger will tell you don't use this at all. But when it's thinned 1 part alcohol to 10 parts water, there's just not enough alcohol to destroy your paint the way it does if it's just like if I just put this in, I could strip a model. It will also make your paint like bubble gum. If you just thin straight with isopropyl alcohol, your paint will turn into bubble gum. We don't want that. But what I have found, when you use 10% of it, it thins the paint with using less liquid. So if that makes sense. So if I'm thinning my paint, let's take a color like this bright pale yellow. It's a thick color. I'm going to put some in my cup here. Don't get stingy with your paint. It always sucks when you run out of thinned paint while you're painting. It's okay to throw away a little bit of paint at the end. So, got that. I'm going to grab a brush to mix it with. And I'm going to show you, see if I can get a little bit closer without it going blurry. So this is what the paint looks like on my brush. Let's do a test. If I push it on the side of this cup, see how the paint stays on top of the brush? Like toothpaste or something? That means the paint's too thick. Okay? So that's my test. If I did it with, say, this color, the paint would be a lot thinner coming out of the bottle because it doesn't have as thick of pigments. So all paint is going to be different when I thin it. See that? On top of that thing. Okay, so let's put in 3 or 4 drops. 1, 2, 3, 4. I usually say I try to thin my paint no more than 50%. So I try to be like 30 to 40% thinned. If I thin it at all. Sometimes paint coming right out of the bottle, some of our paints are very thin. I was surprised at Nova Open last year. I went and my buddy Dan Osborne, who's a really good airbrusher, he was just pouring Monument Pro Acryl into the cup of his airbrush and airbrushing with no thinner at all. It's amazing. But usually you got to put some thinner in. Sometimes you got to put a lot of thinner in. So this is like what I would thin it, the consistency I would thin it for putting my base coats on because I want to get good coverage. So now when I push on the side of this cup, see how the paint, like I can push the paint up through, it's on top, but then as I pull it away, see the bristles go through the paint, or the paint cuts through the bristles. One way or the other. It's not sticking on top of my brush. That's how I know that the paint is ready to airbrush. Now, if I put a whole bunch of thinner in here, like if I put this whole bottle of thinner in here, it would pass the same test. So that's why I do a few drops at a time to get it just the right consistency. Once you've done it a couple times, you kind of just know how to eyeball it. You're like, oh, this is a lighter color. It's going to take 6 drops of thinner as opposed to 3. So I'm just going to start at 6, you know. The other thing is I used to always be real careful. I didn't want to get paint all over the cup, you know, because I didn't want to waste paint. That was crazy. And so I'd end up not mixing it very well. I've learned mix the paint really, really well. Get it all mixed up because sometimes there's some pigment, little clumps of pigment stuck in your paint, and you want to get all that stuff mixed up because that stuff will clog your airbrush right away. So, got that. Wipe off my brush. Okay, so we've got that color. Let's do, I'm going to mix up a couple other colors because we are going to, how are we doing time-wise? Oops, ouch.
It's 11:06. So
Oh, we got an hour. We're rocking.
54 minutes.
Okay, so here is, this is Inky by Darkness from Games Workshop. Oh, I bought this brand new, and I think it was sitting in the sun at my local game store. It's like very clumpy, so whatever. We'll live with it. So we're going to do a couple experiments here, or not experiments, one non-experiment, but one experiment. Actually, neither of them are experiments. I'm sorry, I'm lying.
What?
I don't know. I did it before, but I don't know exactly what will happen this time, so it is kind of an experiment. So this is my first color. I need way more paint than that. First color always needs quite a bit of paint. Oh, gosh, that is like goo. But it thins down okay. Hopefully, we'll find out real quick if this starts clogging my airbrush, and then I'll know the error of my ways. So you can also buy airbrush ready paint. From different Army Painter has some really good airbrush paint, ready paint. Games Workshop has the Citadel Air. Vallejo has an airbrush paint. Like I said, Monument's almost airbrush right out of the bottle. And then there's other brands that are ready to go. So get that good and cleaned up. Grab my airbrush. So I always go, and you don't have to go in this order, but I generally go from darkest to lightest. So let's you know what? I need a little bit more. This just seems really gooey. Of all the paints I could have chosen, I grabbed the one that I was messed up from the start. But this will just show you, I will prove positive that you can spray with just about anything.
Yep.
You can spray with dog poop out of your yard.
Please don't do that.
Please, yeah, don't do that. That would probably be bad for your health. So generally, I found this just over the years. There's lots of things that I found just over painting hundreds of thousands of models over the years, commission painting, what works and what doesn't. I feel like when I just pour the paint into the cup, I clog more. And when I transfer it with a brush, I don't. So why would I do it any other way? Get it in there. I don't generally mix in the cup. Because if something goes, like I tend to clog more if I mix in the cup. But you can't. It's not. I see lots of people mix right in the cup and it works great for them. But I find that I clog more often. So I'm very impatient. I don't want to clog. So there you go. As far as colors I'm choosing for airbrushing in this session, it'll be this Inky by Darkness. A lot of times people switch to another color that's very close. It's not like layering where you want all the colors to be close. My next color will be this Jade. So very big jump in brightness. Then the next highlight will be this color, Bright Jade. So you notice all three of these colors are distinctly different. That helps you out. And maybe we'll do this as a final. You want the colors to be far apart from each other because otherwise there's no reason to airbrush it, really. All right. Needle stuck. So I'll just reseat it. Basically, I undid the chuck, pulled it back a little bit so that it works. All right, spray a little bit, maybe on a paper towel. See that my spray's okay. That looks great. And you know what? Let's start with this guy. So this will be the experiment. We are going to do a shaded Zenithal prime. So his uniform's usually like a tealish green. So I'm going to spray from below and kind of at this angle right here.
Brian's asked what happens if you airbrush with speed paint.
It looks great. That's what happens. It's not opaque though. So I use the speed paints, airbrushing the speed paints for like tinting stuff after the fact. It works great. And you don't have to thin it at all. Really, when you're airbrushing, work at how much you don't thin the paint. Really pay attention to that. So most people are like all about thinning it massively. I mean, obviously, if you have problems and it clogs your airbrush right away or it doesn't work, then obviously thin it a little bit more. But you want to get to the point where you've thinned it the minimum amount for it to work, because then you get the maximum amount out of your paint. Your paint, like the paint in this bottle, is at the best that it can be. If I thin it, I had a friend who would thin their paint like 80%. So 8 drops thinner, 2 drops paint. And I was like, how do you paint anything? Like you're at 20% paint at that point. So we sprayed a little bit of that dark color from below. Since I practiced before with the primer, actually I can be more precise with regular paint because it's easier to spray with. It doesn't clog nearly as much as like primer would. So practicing with your primer works really well. So there we've got a little tint of the dark blue. Okay. On this one, I'm going to spray from below. And this one's much larger. And I want actually to get a better color. So that other one I was just trying to tint it. This one I'm actually painting. Let me pull, oops. Let me break stuff. See how that color goes on? One way to tell if you've over-thinned your paint is when you spray it, nothing happens. You want your color to build up very quickly. At least that's how I spray. Especially on the base coats. If you're tinting something, then you want it to build up slowly, you would probably thin it more. So, but on the initial base coats, let's get a little bit thicker paint. And on this, since it's the shadow color, I could just go from below, but I'm going to kind of spray all over the model because I want, when I put my midtones and highlights, I don't want any of the black to show through. So I can kind of spray from every angle, even on top. Don't have to spray as much on top, of course. And we'll do this tail down here. Now, the other cool thing about spraying the way I spray, where I spray kind of in 10% little sprays, is I can get different layers of this incubi darkness. So it's really hard to tell on camera right now, but this is a little bit brighter incubi, and down here is a little bit darker because I didn't spray as much. So you can get infinite amount of color out of each color that you spray just by spraying more or less of it. And then I'm going to have these little pinchers sort of work their way down to almost black. So I'm going to leave the ends of them a little bit more black. Alright. I think that will work for now. Maybe a little bit more over here. Always keep in mind when the paint dries, it's usually darker than when you put it on. So it works the same for paintbrushing, works the same for airbrushing. Trying to get from all these little angles. All right, so we got that. I'm going to spray this out in my cup. So one thing I try not to do, and I did it a little bit earlier in class, but I'm not going to do it now. I put my brush in there and worked it around. The problem with that is it dislodges halfway dried up paint on the edges of the brush. And if you've been spraying for like here, I've only been spraying for a few minutes, but let's say I've been spraying for an hour with that color. You've got a lot of dried up, semi-dried paint in here. And if I wiggle my brush around in there to clean it off, some of it comes off in sheets and then returns back into paint. So those sheets go to the bottom of the cup. Even if I pour the cup out and put new thinner in, it usually sticks to the bottom of the cup, and then when I spray, it gets stuck in the nozzle, and I have to take my whole airbrush apart. So try to avoid that. So what I'll do is I'll spray this out. The next color will be another shade of teal. So I'm not worried if some of that darker teal gets into it. So see that? Let's get all that out. Come on now. All right. And then what I can do, if I want to get the rest of that paint out, I'll stick a paper towel down in, spin it around, and it gets out whatever's left. And spray a little bit more water in here. It's coming out clear, so it's pretty clean. All right. So that is a clean airbrush, as far as I'm concerned. Let's grab this one. We'll do this color. If it will come out. So some of this Pro Acryl paint starts off really thin, and then the longer you have it, some of the colors get thicker in the tubes. That's okay. I think that's a good amount right there. So what we'll do is I'll mix up both my colors. If I was doing a bunch of these, I would do one color at a time because obviously the color's drying in these cups as you sit here. So with each successive highlight, so this is my mid-tone. This will be my first highlight. With each successive color, you use less and less paint, so you can mix up less paint, basically. 5, I'll do 1, 2, 3, 4, maybe. Mush that down, make sure it's all mixed up. Maybe 2 more drops. Okay, we'll do that one, and then I'll mix up this one. Already got my thinner in there. So the way to kind of tell if this paint's too thick when you start airbrushing is sometimes the paint either A, it won't come out at all, or B, it comes out really sputtery, really speckly. Had a little leaf in there. Okay, so we got those colors. And we're not going to do anything with this one because this is going to be our experimental one. We already sprayed like the darker bluish teal up into there. Now we're going to spray our mid-tone onto this guy. So I've done this before, and all I had was a tiny brush to transfer the paint over, and it took forever. That's not a good thing. But I think we're good here. I don't know why it clogs less when I do it that way, but it does. I think maybe like either A, the big chunks are stuck towards the bottom, or they stick to the brush or something. But when you pour it, they all pour in and... All right. I feel like I had sort of a wiggly brush trigger, so... All right. That color's going down good, and it really doesn't seem like it has any of the darker blue in it. So spray this. And this one, I'm going to go from like 45 degrees from the top. Let's pull back even further. So can you see that paint kind of going on now? And I'm doing that motion like this. Pendulum. Maybe on this back part, I want to angle my model back a little bit so it hits these top parts of those scales better. And then that it gives me a good shadow right there. So I'm just being patient. Spraying a little bit on the arms. See how the arms are starting to get darker out here. Brighter towards the inside. So I'm starting my spray here and ending here, but spraying a little bit more right there. So see how we're starting to get color there? That looks nice. Nice. So I've turned the model around. I'm going to be careful not to spray in this general area right here, like I was spraying more on the head, because I need it to be nice and bright on the head. But I'm not spraying here because I'll erase all those shadows I just put in. Same with the arms. If we go right from the dead middle. Trying to keep the arms a little darker on the backside, because that will look better in the overall picture at the end. So if you notice, there's one thing I'm not worried about at all right now, and that's my airbrush being clogged. Because we cleaned it out. I know it was clean from the very start, and so we should be good. Any small clogs, I can just do a hard spray, but I haven't even really had to do that. So I'll do the bottom of this tail right here, spray this out this way. Oh, you know what? I might change the color there a little bit on the back of that tail. So let's do that. This. So sometimes I make sure that my mid-tone color comes down like halfway on the sides of the model on these parts, because otherwise I have too much shadows. Remember, we still got a highlight coming, so each time I go over things like this head, it just adds more of that mid-tone color. So now we're starting to get, closer and closer to 100% coverage of that mid-tone color. But like down here, there's like 40% coverage. Up here, there's like 80. So I get a brighter mid-tone in the 80% coverage than I do in the 40% coverage. So I just use all that stuff to my advantage. This inside part of the back needs a little bit more. There we go. Okay, I'm gonna pour this back in if I can. I can't. It's always worth trying. Spray that in. See how it was all like super green. And then it starts getting clearer. Okay, we're not really having that with these colors, this problem with these colors, because we haven't mixed up enough color. But you never want to fill your cup with paint more than halfway, because you will tend to have paint spill out. Because when you're airbrushing, your airbrush dips down. And if it spills out, you don't notice it. It'll run down, go up here, and explode off the end of your airbrush. So that's not a good thing, especially for your model. All right, spray this out. I can watch that spray, make sure it's not sputtering or anything. It seems like it's just staying strong. It's waving a little bit, but it's still pretty good. So I think we're okay. Let's go to our highlight color. We'll call this our first highlight. We may do a second one. Depends on how this one looks. All right. Everything's good. Now, same thing. Going to go at like a almost 90% angle right here. We'll start off kind of closer so that we get a good sort of focused highlight right here. And I'm watching how that sprays and how that plays, how the spray sort of plays with my lights and shadows on here. We got that. We'll do a little bit. Yeah, that looks pretty cool, huh? So this is the power of your airbrush in action right here. And you see, even when I kind of screw up, I sprayed a little bit too much there. It will dry and it will look fine. But also, we haven't really been working on this very long. So if I had to go back and just spray it black again, you don't have to clean the paint off or anything. There's no simple greening a model. You just simply reprime it. There's so little paint on the model. That looks rad, huh? I know what you're thinking, Liz. Why didn't you paint the other one like that? Well, because the other one was done with speed paints.
That's true. It was.
See that? Let's spray it very lightly up into the underside of this. Just to bring in a little color under there so it's not just completely pitch black. So on the sides of this tail, I'm going to go at a really steep, like I'm going straight on like this, so it catches the shadows on the back sides of all those little bumps and curls and like that. So I'm going to go further away, do a really light spray. So this creates a very, very soft kind of highlight back there. Same with kind of on the sides of this guy. I'm going to re-hit the front of the face here. And if you simply, like, watch how it is in the camera. See how I can see the back part? Whatever I can see from the, like if I look right behind my airbrush, let's say it's right here, I can see those parts back there. So paint would hit there. But if I just keep moving it like this, I get to the point where my paint can't hit it at all. And then I just spray straight from the front. Spray a little bit more on these arms and knuckles. And here's the deal. There's no like, this is exactly how you got to spray this model. That comes out of you, right? So that's your own artistic expression there. You know, the way, the angles in which you hit it, the colors in which you choose, all that stuff. reflects directly on your own artistic impression, and none of that is wrong per se. So don't be afraid to practice it. I know the more I airbrushed and the more I saw how the paint mimicked how I wanted the lighting to look on a model, the more ideas I got and the better I got at just airbrushing and painting models. So we've got that. That looks pretty cool, huh? I'm going to hit this other side just a little bit. There we go. Nothing's stopping me from bringing back that Incubi Darkness and shooting shadows up into here too. So we got that. Oops. Let's do this. And we're doing really good time-wise. Again, I'm going to watch that spray. It's looking pretty good. So I know my nozzle's pretty healthy. Now, granted, we've only sprayed a little bit of paint, but sometimes it clogs up pretty quick, depending on the paint, how old the paint is. You know, if the paint's been sitting in the sun, all that stuff is bad. I'm going to show you how to, I'm just going to mix it in the cup. So I'm going to do what I told you not to do. 1, 2, 3, 4 drops. I hope this clogs, and then that way you'll know. No. I do this all the time too, but so we're going to do 1, 2, 3, 4. 4 to 4. Wipe off the rest. So this magenta is going to be my contrasting color to the teal. Magenta and teal look great together. So, also you can see it kind of turned purple when it mixed with that other color, but now it's just the magenta. Very good. Look at that, wiggly trigger. I'm going to, sometimes the needle just gets stuck, so I'm going to reseat the needle. All right. Okay, so this is going to be what I call a kicker color. And a kicker color is a contrasting color to the color you're using. And it's just there. It shouldn't be there. It's just there to create interest with the rest of the paint job. Like make things more interesting. So if I'm looking at this and I'm like, that looks cool, but it's kind of boring, Aaron. So let's go a little bit in the arms maybe. Now these kicker colors don't necessarily have to go into shadows. They can go into highlights, midtones, whatever. But they look really good in shadows too. So see how we've kind of changed the look of these arms. Sometimes you got to find a good angle of attack to get in. Holding the angle on my airbrush so like if the magenta goes over where I sprayed, it doesn't hit the top of the model. It just goes off into oblivion. So going back to like having that really fine touch, spraying little tiny dots. Maybe I can put that into some of these shadows right here. That underside of this, his jowls. So I'm going to have this purple. Ooh, I'm going to put it down here. That looks kind of cool. And I'm going to run it up the shadows on this side of the body. Just real lightly. I never noticed. I didn't have my other light on here real good. You see how that's starting to look kind of cool? So let's say we want the front of that mouth to be more pink, I can take some silly putty or some blue tack. In this case, we'll use silly putty. Bought this online. It's like cost nothing. Literally, they sent me money back. No, it wasn't that cheap, but it was definitely pretty cheap. The first silly putty I ever bought was in the store, and it's really hard to find silly putty in the stores, around here at least. And it was completely rock hard. It was so old in the store. It was not silly putty anymore. But then I bought it online. I got like a 3-pack. I'll have it forever. We've got that. And what did I do? I can take a sculpting tool. Let's get in here close. I can push the sculpting tool down in here so it just makes it so that stuff. So right now I'm creating a mask. So anything that I put silly putty over will not get painted. And this is, you can use tape, but tape doesn't work nearly as well, especially on a model like this that has lots of nooks and crannies. Doesn't stick very well. So put this on. I can squeeze it and like put it out here further away and then just sort of squeeze it into place. This is a way to quickly mask off parts of your model. You can use your fingers too, but that's no fun when you can use silly putty. Alright, so paint will fly in far spots that you didn't want, so just kind of make sure that you got enough of it covered up. We'll put this rest of this hunk down here. Alright, so we got that. See how quick that was? And then I'm just going to choose to spray in directions that don't go back and hit my model in other spots. You see how quickly that builds up? That color builds up over the black and the teal. That's because I didn't thin my paint too much. Okay, so we got that. I think that is pretty good. You know what? We'll use my airbrush to kind of blow dry that. Because as it dries, it gets darker. So we'll put another coat on. So you can keep spraying even though it's wet, but it really doesn't, because it's wet, it will always dry kind of darker. So you want that first layer to dry and then put a new layer on. And it will get much brighter that way. So that's another reason to spray in lighter amounts, because your colors build up quicker. It's like slowing down to paint faster. Alright, and then what we're going to do, now you can't do this if you're painting armies too well, but on this I can totally do it. So I'm just going to take my lighter color, squeeze it in there, 1, 2 drops. Got paint on my finger. This is why I always look so messy. Liz loves it. Oh yeah. Three drops of thinner. I don't know if I really needed that, but what the heck. So see that color? Much lighter pink. This one we'll spray like from the top. Like that. And then maybe we'll go right from the middle on the inside. Something like that. And let's pull this off and see what it looks like. Holy cow. I got a paintbrush in my mouth. It's dirty. I got an airbrush in my hand that's dirty. I got a model that's not dirty. That's nice. There, I got it. We got that base coat on like that. Pretty cool. Now, let's clean out my airbrush. So right now we've got pink right here, and I want to do like a final highlighty color, but I do not want that color to be pink. So we'll spray all this out. Take my finger, or you know what, better yet, I'm going to use one of my makeup remover pads. Spin it around inside. That gets most of that out. See that big old fleck? If that fell off in the airbrush, it would clog me pretty bad. Something fierce. So we'll spray this out. And pull our needle out, wipe it off, just in case there's anything more on there. And lucky for us, we mixed that highlight color a long time ago. So maybe that's still pretty wet, right? We'll find out. So this highlight seems really much lighter than anything else. That's okay, because we'll only spray a little of it. So again, going back to controlling your spray. Just doing little 10% sprays. Maybe that's the key there. And you know what? I'm going to spray a little bit on this face, the mouth. Alright. Brighter there. Maybe I want that darker in there, so I'm use my thumb as a masking tool. So I'll bring that up a little bit. That looks cool. And then we'll go right there. Look good? So see, I'm just doing so this color is like that color, but what I'm spraying on the model is like that much. So one thing that's really hard to do is know what this color is going to look like on this model when only sprayed at like 10%. So part of that is you just got to do it. You got to paint. And if you're spraying, you're keeping your airbrush from being clogged, you're going to be airbrushing a lot more, which means you will know what a lot of different colors look like once they're done. So that looks pretty cool. I'm going to spray a little bit in here.
That's great to hear. John said this has made Airbrushes significantly less intimidating.
And we have a lot of airbrushing videos on our Patreon too. I also do private coaching classes. So if you're like, you know, I've got it pretty good, but I just need like, you know, an extra one-on-one session or something, you can go to miniaturemonthly.com or our Miniature Monthly Patreon. Both good resources for that type of stuff. Oh no. Where did that come from? I must have had paint on my finger. There we go. Good times. All right. A little bit up there. Let's do further away. We'll just sort of mist it on the back side of this model. Brings up the highlight just a little bit, but not too much. Same over here, same right here. That looks pretty cool. Then if I'm going to paint these eggs all lighter colors, so maybe I just spray them real quickly, sort of giving them a zenithal with this final highlight color. That just makes them easier to paint later on. So I'm trying.
How would you do the eggs?
I would do the eggs with a brush. So you see right there, I zenithal them. They still have some shadow areas down below. They've got some of the greenish colors in there as well. And then when I put, let's say what's it called? Let me get it. Oh my goodness.
Wow.
What's going on? Not slaughter red. What am I thinking? Zealot yellow. Here we go. I'll just put a little of that on my palette. Grab a brush. Now here's the cool thing. I've proved to myself over and over again on this model that I can hit small areas. So I could actually keep that highlight color in my airbrush, wait for this to dry, and then put a really slight, super light yellow highlight on the top of these eggs, and maybe they're done. What do you think of that?
Great.
It's a combination of airbrush, paintbrush. See if we can get this on. Maybe we'll get lucky and it will dry enough and I'll just do it. So obviously the more detail I can put into this model, the better it will look. So a lot of that detail will be done with the paintbrush. Like I've heard people talk about like, oh, you highlight the eyes with the airbrush. Or you paint the eyes with the airbrush. I've never actually seen anyone do that. I've seen them paint the eye socket with the airbrush, like maybe make it darker or lighter if they're doing an OSL or something. But I've never actually seen someone paint detail of an eye with an airbrush on a miniature. So I'm sure somebody will prove me wrong one day, but until then, you're going to do it with your paintbrush. So all the little, if I want to do like little stippling details on these eggs, I would do that by brush, and then can always use the airbrush to kind of smooth things out. All right, so we got all that. So There's our eggs with the first color on them. Can do the same thing with that face. Mouth. I'm going to grab Magos Purple. So if this color was much more opaque or darker, I wouldn't be able to do this. It would be a bad idea. Or I'd have to thin it down quite a bit. Maybe that doesn't work as good. Magos Purple is kind of see-through. So those tones of pink that I painted, they make a difference. And that way I get good definition down in the mouth and the wrinkles of his disgusting lips. Okay, so we got that on there. Let's let that dry. Yeah, this one was contrast. This one was army painter, speed paints. So just means to an end. Which one had the color I wanted? Okay, so let's go back to this guy because remember we just painted like the bluish teal from below. Oh no, I'm sorry, it wasn't that guy. Where is he? He's right here. Yes, this guy looks more bluish teal from below. So this one's technically just going to be a Zenithal prime. But let's do, I got my highlight color back, that yellow. And I'm going to do a really soft spray of yellow over the top of this guy. So again, see how that's barely coloring? It's going to do the same thing on him. So he's just a little bit more yellow and maybe even a little bit more yellow up on his head, the top of his. So what this does is it will create a little bit, oops. Actually, that didn't do too much bad right there. Creates just a little bit of yellow light coming from above. And then when I put all my colors, like if I use contrast paints over this, I will have, it's tinted a little bit yellow in my highlights. It's tinted a little bit blue in my shadows already before I even start. So that's a great way to start models as well if you want to be sort of more artsy-fartsy. Let's go back to this guy. See if I can blow dry this without moving that paint around too much. All right, so we did that. I'm gonna come back in, spray a little bit. So I'm always testing to make sure my airbrush is doing what I want it to do. Especially when I'm doing more detail type work like this. I don't want any surprise things to happen. Do this in front. That's way too wet still. So I'm bringing back a little bit of those highlights. That paint's way too wet still, so we're just going to leave that at that. Let me wash this out real quick. And Spray this out. Wipe out my cup. Wash that out. Pull my needle out. Wipe it off. And we'll do one last thing. Let's just use the Magos purple. What the heck, right? Works the same for speed paints, or whatever. You technically shouldn't have to thin it out, but if you do, just maybe throw a little bit of water in there. And we'll take this. Oops. What this does is it will start tinting everything towards purple where I spray it. If that doesn't feel dark enough, you can always use an even darker color. But I like spraying with the contrast paints or with speed paints because it doesn't build up as quick. So I can kind of spray it on, see how it looks, spray more on. As opposed to, say, inks and stuff. Inks are much stronger. So any final questions before we kind of finish this off?
Brian said thanks, you both learned a lot. Thanks for being here.
Yeah, thank you. And then I'm going to spray that out, and we will grab, this is not burnt umber, this is actually Payne's Gray. It doesn't fit in my, the Dalarani bottles don't fit in my paint rack, so switched it. But Payne's Gray is a really, really dark blue, blue-black. It's great for shadows.
2 minutes.
Perfect. So, watch how dark this will make this. That's with just little 10% sprays. It's super effective. And I can just make some parts way darker, but just with a little bit of paint. It's friggin' awesome. If you need something to look blacker, spray it literally over black and it'll make the black look blacker because there's a lot of bit of blue in it. Get like that. There we go. All right.
Ta-da.
Ta-da. Pretty cool. And
John said it's been a fun set of seminars. Thank you.
well, thank you. I appreciate you guys showing up. Again, these will be online here in the next few days. Then on the Miniature Monthly YouTube. And then on flying frogs as soon as they get to putting them up. But let's let me just wash this out real quick. And I'll show you the models, or where we got on the models. Okay, I'm just like...
You're making a mess.
Yeah, there's paint everywhere. Good times, good times. Okay, so this is this guy. And obviously I'm not done. If you wanted to be done, I mean, shoot, that's a really quick way to paint a figure. You know, looks pretty decent. Put it on the gaming table, kill him, and move on. You know, but obviously I would add some highlights by brush on here in appropriate colors and stuff. I think these are darkstone gems right here, so you could paint those as a different color. Put some speckling on these eggs. Obviously highlight up the mouth. Maybe make that center part of the mouth darker. That would be cool. On this guy, where'd he go? I already lost him again. And this is our Zenithal Prime that has a yellowish, and you can see like it just looks brighter on that side. Got the yellow coming from the top, hitting down, and then the blue coming from the bottom. And that was over a standard white-black Zenithal Prime. So, cool ways, just different ways of looking at things, different ways of painting. Like, honestly, you could probably put one color of speed paints on here, like some green for the uniform or whatever color uniform you wanted, gray or a grayish color for the flag, and it would pick up all these undercolors and give you a nice look. So, there you have it. The two dudes airbrushed. Cool beans. All right. Well, thank you all for coming. Let me move all this stuff out of the way. Thank you all for coming. It was a fun session, and yeah, hopefully this helps people in the future.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. All right. Oh.
How can they find you?
You can find me at Art of Lovejoy on Instagram. And there's a bunch of Shadows of Brimstone figures in there over the years. You can also find me on Patreon. We are Miniature Monthly on Patreon, and then at miniaturemonthly.com, which is at the bottom of this right there. I can't move my fingers right. Right there, miniaturemonthly.com. So you can do private coachings at miniaturemonthly.com. You can also sign up for private coachings on the Patreon as well.
Also on the Patreon, we are currently having a competition.
Yeah,
and the
2 days.
Prize is
sword.
Custom engraved sword.
Yeah, it's really cool.
So it closes in 2 days.
Yeah, you have 2 days to paint a figure.
But if you already have something painted, you can still enter that.
Yeah, you could. So there you have it. Anyways, thank you very much, and we will see you next time.
Bye.
Bye.